So here are the cattle that I brought back yesterday. Now, I guess officially starting yesterday, I don't have any more cattle on grass. I effectively have all of my animals on feed. And so this is what the animals look like. I had them on grass up until yesterday. And you see animals like this one right here. Like animals like this one, I got a few of them. I got another one back there right there if you take a good look. He's kind of back there. But animals that I have that are this size are going to be starting to go into market maybe here in about a month. I would say that all of these animals right here, all of them, just about all of them will be going to market within the next 3 months. And so the whole thing that I got set up for this right now is that the animals that are in the front, still need about another month to get stabilized. They still need about another month. And so I figured what I would do is that during that month that I'm stabilizing the animals, and I got a couple of small animals back here. Like if y'all take a look back there, I have a little white heifer, and she's pretty small. I would say that she's probably about maybe about 350 pounds. And when I start selling the big animals, I can do it whichever way I want. I can add animals to the smaller animals on this herd, but in all, the whole thing about what I got going on right now is that here in the summer months, here by about next month, I'll have to actually intentionally reduce the size of my herd because it's going to get too hot. It will be getting too hot, and then I will intentionally reduce the size of my balance sheet. And so the big idea, and when I do that, right, the whole idea is that when I do that, I will deleverage myself so that when the hot months are over, I am ready to re-leverage myself, and then I can buy a boatload of cattle, right? That's the big idea. And so, the whole thing with what I got going on right now is that these animals, effectively they'll have to be here for, 1 to 3 months, something like that. They may even all go to market within 2 months. They're pretty big, right? A majority of them are, and I got maybe about a half a dozen small ones, and the half a dozen small ones, I can keep them. But, effectively a majority of these animals are going to be going to market in the next 2 months, okay? And so I figured what I would do is that I would stabilize the animals in the front. Then when I start to liquidate these animals, I will have a massive excess of capital, which is not where I want to be, right? I talk about this, cash does not do anything. At the end of the day, I mean, it's important to have some cash. It's important to have some money, but at the end of the day, cash is not that good of an asset, okay? Cash is not that good of an asset. You're better off holding an asset. You're better off holding an asset at its equitable evaluation, at its appraisal value. That is you're better off holding good assets. Long story short, all right? If you have a good asset, the whole idea of having a good asset is that it's not just valuable to you, it is valuable to everybody. And if it's valuable to everybody, what is that value called? The appraisal value, right? You don't ask somebody what your assets are worth. You go and you ask like a banker, or you ask somebody who actually knows what they're doing, all right? You don't go and ask random people what your assets are worth, because how would they know? All right, if you want to figure out what your assets are worth, talk to a banker about it. Go and talk to somebody who knows what they're doing about it. Don't go and ask some random, what I call Billy Joe Bob. All right, don't go and ask a random person, because how are they going to know? All right, and so, you're better off holding on to a good asset. And, and I talk about the whole idea of a good asset. What makes a good asset, right? If you're purchasing it at its equitable evaluation, at its appraisal evaluation, and the asset needs to produce a positive return. If the asset does not produce a positive return, it is not a good asset. All right, you more or less have a liability. And what is an asset that I use for this example, right? A house. All right, a house is not a good asset unless if you're renting it out and making a positive return on that, then sure, it could be a decent asset, it could be a good asset. But houses are like cars. All right, houses are like cars. You're always going to have to put money into it. You're going to have to pay for your electric bill. You're going to have to pay for your gas bill. You're going to have to pay for your maintenance costs, right? You're going to have to pay for property taxes. You're going to have to pay for all this stuff. right? And you know, that's not, you know, that, you know, a house is not a good asset. Okay, house is not a good asset. I would rather have the S&P 500 than a house. All right, and you know, and so the whole thing that I got going on with this right now is that, you know, effectively I'm looking to get these animals ready for market. You know, majority of these animals will be ready for market here in about 2 months. All right, and then I'll have the animals in the front stabilized. I actually had another animal in the front this morning looking like she wasn't doing very good, and so I went ahead and gave her a shot of fluorophenical as well, because the animal that got a shot of fluorophenical yesterday is responding very well to the antibiotics. The animal is responding very well to the antibiotics, and he's looking like he's doing substantially better this morning. And so I went ahead and gave the other calf a shot of fluorophenical as well, just in case they have something similar. And so I went ahead and gave her a shot of fluorophenical, and she's actually and I gave her a shot of Banamine as well. I gave her the exact same treatment as the calf that I gave the treatment to yesterday, and she's standing at the feed bunk eating food right now, so that's very good. And but long story short of what's going to happen over the next 2 or 3 months is that I will have a massive influx of capital. All right, that's not exactly a situation that I want to be in, but you know, for me to effectively get beyond this situation, what I need to do is I need to re-leverage myself. And when I re-leverage myself, I will be buying myself a new piece of land, right? That's the whole idea. You know, the thing about this situation is that, you know, unless I buy myself a new piece of land, I really can't, you know, I will always be stuck in a situation that I cannot reinvest all of my capital. All right, you know, and I was telling you about this yesterday, and I've been talking about this for a long time. If I were to just take, and think about it like this, when you take a look at my herd, right? When you take a look at my herd, has my herd gone up in value? Like, use some common sense, right? I mean, they have gone up in value a massive margin, right? And I had them all on grass until yesterday. I legitimately had, you know, 80% of my cattle on grass until yesterday. And when I grow grass, it's practically free, right? You know, these are the animals that I have right now. And look at how, you know, some of these animals are already 650 pounds, right? I had like 80% of these animals on grass until yesterday. All right, I mean, you know, I had effectively a majority of my animals on grass for the last 9 months. Right, and when I grow grass, I grow it very well, right? I effectively grow grass so well that I can even graze 3 or 4 animals per acre, 500-pound animals per acre, 24/7, feed them 90% of their diet, and put on over 3 pounds a day for about $350 a month. All right, it's very cheap. Growing grass is very cheap, but it's also very complicated, because if you're sitting there and you think that you have a nitrogen deficiency, but you have a sulfur deficiency, and you put nitrogen across your field, your sulfur deficiency will get worse. And then you're screwed, because your grass won't grow at all. And there's a very realistic possibility that you turn into a situation where you go, oh my God, the fertilizer didn't do anything. Right, and then you just completely, you know, give up. You just throw in the towel, right? When in reality, it's like you had a sulfur deficiency, but if you correct that sulfur deficiency, you're also going to end up with a phosphorus deficiency. And if you correct the phosphorus deficiency, then you're going to end up with a nitrogen deficiency. And so you take a look at your situation, and you have to determine from that point, what kind of fertilizer should I utilize? Right, the basic, you know, in terms of the generalized information, the 513 NPK. If your field has a sulfur deficiency and you correct the sulfur deficiency, and then after you correct the sulfur deficiency, once you have started to correct the sulfur deficiency, you also end up with a phosphorus deficiency. And once you have started to correct the phosphorus deficiency, then you end up with a nitrogen deficiency, right? In this situation, you will have to utilize a fertilizer blend, right? And if you do not use the right type of fertilizer, your grass won't grow. All right, don't end up in a situation where you try and fertilize a field, or where you go out and you fertilize a field and it doesn't work. And then you go, oh my God, fertilizer doesn't do anything. All right, you know, what happened was that you messed up. All right, take a look at your situation and reassess. And I show you my results, because I actually do this stuff in real life. When I grow grass, I legitimately grow enough grass to feed about 3 to 4 animals per acre, 500-pound animals per acre, and they put on over 3 pounds a day. Granted that I supplement with a little bit of grain, and when I supplement with that little bit of grain, I supplement with the grain depending on the feed values of the grass. And if I want to see what is going on inside, inside the digestive system of my animal, I take a look at the manure and I grade their manure. That's a very easy way to take a look at the instantaneous look at how the manure, how the digestive system of the animal is doing. All right, it's, that's how I do it. All right. And so, but these are the animals right here. These are the animals. I brought them all back home from the lease property yesterday. A majority of these animals are going to be going for sale. And, this whole idea, and I've talked about this in the past a lot, but the idea of utilizing your assets to buy you more assets, right? And, I've used the home for this example. If you want to buy a $500,000 house, go and buy yourself a $200,000 house. All right, you can buy, they're not going to be, you're not going to end up in a bad neighborhood. You're not going to end up in a crummy house. You are going to get yourself a brand new house in a decent neighborhood that is also brand new. All right, effectively, brand new small homes in my area in a good neighborhood are about $175,000. All right, and if you pay off that house, you can then sell the house, or whatever, rent it out, and then use a line of credit against it and then rent it out. All right, you can do something with it to access the equity. You can sell it, or you can use a line of credit against it, etc., etc. And then you can use the money to buy yourself as a down payment for a bigger house. And then I also use my cattle as an example, right? I use my cattle as an example. When I first started this business, I started this business with 5 animals. Now I have 45, and I realistically have enough money to buy like 3 or 4 more. And also in a month, I will start liquidating. All right, I will effectively be liquidating. And also in the situation that I am in right now, I am also starting to have a pretty large amount of unrealized gain value in my herd, just because the number of animals that I have is increasing pretty drastically. 40 animals, 50 animals will go up in value faster than 30 animals. All right, 50 animals will have a larger unrealized gain than 30 animals. All right, so the unrealized gain of my herd is actually going up very quickly as well. I will probably have to start leveraging against that as well, or I'm just going to be sitting on, or I will legitimately end up in a situation where I only have like 30% of my balance sheet leveraged, and there's no reason to do that. I would rather use more leverage. All right, I've talked about 70%. I leverage about 70% of my balance sheet, right? If I have 30% of my balance sheet leveraged, right? But there are more ways to leverage against the balance sheet, because, if I have, okay, let's say that I'm in a situation where I take a look at my balance sheet and then I take a look at my income, right? I say, okay, well, I'm paying myself $25,000 a month. I write myself a check for $25,000 a month, right? And then I take a look at my herd and I say, well, my herd is about 30% leveraged. My herd is about 30% leveraged. In this situation, I can leverage against my herd and just hold on to the cash, if that's legitimately what I wanted to do. But if I did that, you also have to remember that if I did that, I would start accumulating about $400,000 a year cash. If I did that, I would have about $500,000 cash, and I would still have my business, right? And if I started to do that, then why would I do that, right? Because, you also have to understand that as time progresses, I will liquidate assets. And when I liquidate assets, I will also make a return, and I will have to invest that money as well. All right, why, and I've talked about this all the time. There's no reason to sit around with $250,000 cash. There's no reason to do that. There's no reason for me to sit around with $500,000 cash. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to do anything. It's not like you even have a lot of money. $500,000, it's not, if you legitimately went to the bank right now and said, I want to buy a piece of land for $500,000, they will, you can get a loan for $500,000 for like $3,000 a month. That's all. That's all you have to be. If you legitimately pay the bank like $3,000 a month, they will just give you the $500,000 loan. All right, $500,000 is not a lot of money. It's a very small amount of money. And $500,000 is not going to do anything, right? You're better off, investing that money into an asset, having that asset producing you a return. And if you legitimately, and I've talked about this all the time in terms of my business, in terms of how I utilize financial, my financials, right? If I legitimately want to buy something, I can still buy it. I don't need $500,000 cash in the bank account to buy something. All right, I don't, if I want to buy something, I can just buy it. It doesn't matter, right? And I've talked about this in terms of a realistic sense. I mean, I can effectively buy anything on the planet. All right, it doesn't matter. All right, cash does not do anything. If you sit there and holding on to cash, oh my God, I got cash. Number one, you're going to lose money simply because of not depreciation, but simply because of inflation. Your capital is probably going to be getting inflated. I talk about the idea of the government printing money, right? Deficit spending on a very massive scale. And I'm not saying it's just the government. A lot of people also deficit spend, right? A lot of people go into debt for nonsensical things. All right, credit card debt, buy now, pay later, university loans, cars, right, mortgages, stuff like that, right? I mean, people use all sorts of debt for all sorts of reasons. When I use debt, the reason that I use debt is to leverage against the money that I already have, to leverage against my assets. When I utilize debt, I'm not living my dream. Oh my God, I want to go to university so I can live my dream. I'm not doing that. Oh my God, I want to buy this house to live my dream. I'm not doing, oh my God, I want to buy this car. I don't do that. When I use debt, the reason that I use debt is, number one, to purchase myself a tax deductible asset at its appraisal value. And the reason that I do that is to intentionally increase the value of the asset. And then I can pay myself whatever I need whenever I need it. That's how I utilize debt. Oh my God, I want to add an addition to my house. Oh my God, I want to buy myself a new car. Oh my God, I want to go to university. I don't, oh my God, whatever, right? Oh my God, I want to go on a trip to Disneyland. Oh my God, I want to go and live my dream. I don't use debt for things like that. I don't use debt for things like that. When I use debt, the reason that I use debt is to purchase myself a tax deductible asset at its appraisal value with the intentions of increasing the value of the asset. And at that point, I can pay myself whatever I want, whatever I need to a reasonable degree. All right, because let's say that I'm in a situation, right, where I am leveraged 30%. Let's just say that I'm leveraged 30% of my money, right? Let's say that I'm leveraged against 30% of my balance sheet, and I'm paying myself $20,000 a month. Okay, so if I'm leveraged 30% against my balance sheet, and I'm paying myself $20,000 a month, that means my assets, my balance sheet is actually also producing a positive return. And let's say that I take a look at my situation and I have determined that I'm going to leverage against my balance sheet because I have too much positive equity, right? And so I go and I start holding on to my cash and I start leveraging against my balance sheet. Even then, all right, when you think about it in terms of a forward direction, that's effectively the situation that I will end up here in about 3 months. Here in about 3 months, if I do not leverage against my balance sheet, if I do not re-leverage myself, and I just take the money that I make from my cattle business and put it back into my business, I will legitimately end up in a situation where I have about 30% leverage and I have about an income. I am paying myself about $20,000 to $25,000 a month. That's what's going to happen. All right, and what does that look like? That effectively looks like me. I have 120 cattle and I owe the bank 40. If I have 120 cattle, and actually I would be paying myself probably $40,000 or $50,000 a month at that point. I would probably be paying myself $50,000 a month. And even when I pay myself that money, I will still have about 100 cattle sitting at home. And those 100 cattle would go up in value. All right, that's effectively the situation that I'm in right now, right? And this is also what I'm saying by one of the most difficult things that in terms of financially for me right now, it is actually becoming very difficult for me to reinvest all of my money. I am making such a drastic amount of money that it is becoming difficult to reinvest all of it. Legitimately, that is one of my big problems right now. And just to put things in perspective, you see these animals right here. A majority of these animals will be going to the sale barn within the next 3 months. If I just take the money from selling these animals and put it back into my business, I will legitimately end up with like 100 animals in the next 2 months, 90 animals in the next 2 months. All right, and then I will also have the animals that are stabilized in the front. Those animals that are stabilized in the front, I purchased them with zero leverage. I just took the money that I made from selling my last set of animals and I bought them. Those animals are entirely my own money. If they are stabilized and over the next month, even right now, they've already gone up in value, right? And I've always said that when it comes to investing money, when I put my money into a deal, if I lose a couple thousand of it, I don't care. Why would I care? It's my money. I don't owe it to the bank. It's not like it matters. I've always said in terms of like losing an animal, I don't care about the money. The money, the money is whatever. All right. And I've talked about it. I'm not going to lose money farming. The chance of me losing money farming is 0%. If I was legitimately going to lose money, it would have to be like I did something extremely idiotic, like I started doing drugs, or I started drinking all the time, or I became an idiot. It would have to be something like that. I'm not going to lose money farming. Right, and the animals that I have in the front yard, those animals, I purchased them entirely with my own money from the animals that I sold. Right, I sold animals and then I bought these animals, right? I bought the grain, I bought these animals, etc., etc. So these animals are all entirely my money. By the next month, they will probably have gone up in value even more. And if I have these animals in the front and they've gone up in value for 2 months, there is also an unrealized gain value on these animals, right? At that point, I would even leverage against them. And I would even have animals still back here, right? And when I sell these animals, if I sell these animals and I make enough money with my own money to buy, let's say that I have whatever. Let's say that I have, I have 45 animals right now. Let's say that I sell 25 over the next 2 months. If I sell 25 animals over the next 2 months and I make enough money to buy 50, right, then that effectively puts me in a situation where I have 70 animals, right? I have gone net positive, 50, I have gone net positive another 20 animals. So I have, and I still, let's just say 50 because, I have a couple, I have enough money to buy 3 or 4 more animals to my bank account. And so let's say that I have 70 animals. And so I went from 50 to 70, right? Or I went from 45 to 70. If I went from 45 to 70, then I would be net positive 25 animals, right? So I wouldn't buy 70. I would buy 95 because I would leverage against my earnings as well, right? And I would even leverage against the 20 animals that I still have, right? So I would effectively be buying 115 animals. And then let's say 1 more month goes by, right, and I sell another 10 animals, right? This is when I take a look at it over the next 3 months, if I were to just take the money that I make and invest it, I would effectively end up with like 120 cattle just in the next 3 months. All right, and this is the big problem that I'm running into right now, right? This is one of the big issues that I'm running into right now, and so I have determined that I will deleverage myself, and then I will take a new line of credit. I will take new loans. I'm looking to even buy myself a new piece of land, and then I will re-leverage myself. But this is the big idea of utilizing assets to buy more assets, right? I didn't start off with 45 cattle. I started off with 5. When I raised those 5 animals and I sold them, the first time effectively I made enough money to just make all my money back, and then I realized I can make all my money back, right? And then use the assets to buy more assets. When I sell these cattle and I take the money that I make from selling these cattle and I put it back into the business, I can grow my herd. When I take a look at it in terms of me just running my balance sheet and me just running my business, I am effectively compounding about 25%, 30% growth, something like that, 25% growth every single month. My business is actually expanding by itself, granted that I continue to do my part. My business is growing by about 25% a month. I would actually anticipate that between now and the end of the year, I will just about double my income, maybe even more. And as of today, I am selling about 10 animals every month. And when I sell those 10 animals, I still have about 35 or 40 animals left at home. And I've spoken about this in terms of a realistic perspective. My income, the amount of money that I am bringing home right now, is about $500,000 a year. All right, I bring home about $500,000 a year, and I would anticipate that I just about more than double that by the end of this year. And the whole thing about, having positive equity and, not paying myself the money, just taking a look at how much money should I pay myself to do what I need to do on a monthly basis, etc., etc. If I legitimately felt like I needed more cash, which, why would you hold on to cash? Cash is not going to do anything. I've even spoken about this in the past. When I sold my animals and I made a large excess of money, I would rather have held on to the animals than have the cash. I would have rather held on to the animals. All right. The cash is not going to do anything. Granted that I'm not cash poor. I'm not cash poor. All right. You should have some cash. All right. But you don't want to be in a situation where you think cash is the greatest asset. Cash is not the greatest asset. It's actually pretty bad. All right, it goes down in value over a long period of time and is not going to do anything. It will legitimately just sit there as a number in your bank account. All right, and so, I would rather hold on to good assets, right? Tax deductible assets that I purchase at an appraisal value that I can knowledgeably appreciate. That's better than holding on to cash. And granted that me, like, I'm not cash poor, right? I mean, I'm not cash poor. I mean, I have, but me, I don't worry about money. I don't worry about money. I worry about other things, right? What direction is my business going? What does my balance sheet look like? Right? What do I anticipate I will get done over the next month? Where do we, that's the kind of stuff that I think about. All right, I don't sit there and go, oh my God, my life is a magical journey. I fell out of heaven at 7 and I'm going to go skipping off to Disneyland. Oh my God, I'm just going to throw myself into the wind and see what happens. This is the direction that I'm going. These are the objectives that I will meet as I go. I will do this. I will liquidate 10 animals every month. Even when I liquidate 10 animals every month, I will still have about 35 or 40 animals at home. Right, I am raising these animals. My results right now are actually better, just about better than the commercial average. Right, I will raise these. I will utilize this feed. I will utilize this fertilizer. I would anticipate that my earnings are going to be this much. This is what I will do with the money. That's the kind of stuff that I do. Right, I don't just throw myself into the wind. I don't go, oh my God, my life is a magical journey and I fell out of heaven at 7 and my opinions are going to get me somewhere in life. Me and my buddy pals are going to go walking off into the sunset. I don't do anything like that. This is exactly what I'm going to do. This is what my assets are. This is how I appraise my assets. This is what I believe my assets will be worth next month. This is how much, money I will be paying myself. This is what I will do with that money. That's the kind of stuff that I do. I think in terms of an objective fashion, all right? I think about things objectively. My life is a magical journey and I fell out of heaven at 7 and my opinions are important. You're going to die poor. When it comes to things like this, and I'm not looking to float my own boat. I'm not looking to float my own boat. I am just saying, when we take a look at it for what it is, I am borderline somewhere between 93 and 97% accurate, right? Something like that. And in all honesty, most of the time when I am wrong, I actually end up doing better than I thought. right? Let's just be honest about it. Legitimately, it's happened. And I'm even saying it right now, and I'm not looking to get too far ahead of myself. But there is a very real possibility that I end up doing better than I thought. There is, because I am not fully baking in the amount of leverage that I will utilize, right? And it's hard for me to exactly determine how much leverage I will utilize, because when my herd grows, the unrealized gain value of my herd will begin to grow exponentially faster. So that it's very difficult for me to exactly pinpoint how much leverage I will use, because I am starting to realize that I will probably have to leverage against some of the unrealized gains. I will probably have to, or I will be sitting on a massive excess of positive equity, and it will probably drop my leverage ratio under 50%. All right, and so it will probably start to drop my leverage ratio under 50%. And why would I keep my leverage ratio at like 30%? Why would I do that? Right? I mean, I just got to find a way to invest more money. All right, I'll have to find a way to invest more money. And I'm being completely straightforward about this. These animals right here, but effectively about 25 of them will be going to market in the next 2 months. When I sell the 25 of them, I'll probably have enough money to buy about 50. I'll still have 20 animals at home, so that puts me at 70 animals. I went from 45 to 70, right? And, out of those 70 animals, 20 are still stabilized, right? And, granted that I won't be buying all 50 animals at the same time, right? I buy them in bits and pieces, right? I always say I invest my money first, right? And then I leverage against my stabilized asset. Because, like, if I have 70 animals worth of money, and then in the next month after that, I will probably have another 10 animals ready for sale, all right? And so when I take a look at it, when I invest my money, let's say that I have enough money to buy 70 animals, right? Here in about 2 months, I will have enough money from just selling my cattle, using my own money to just buy 70 animals, all right? If I just sell my animals and then I take the money and I put it back into my business, I will have enough money to buy 70 animals. So let's say that I have enough money to buy 70 animals. And let's say when it's all said and done, let's say I have 65 animals left. Let's say that I have 60 animals left, and the animals, I raised them, for 2 months, right? And so during those 2 months, they have gone up in value, right? Why, I don't care about losing the 10 animals worth of money. I don't care about the money. The money is negligible to me. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's not like we're even talking about a lot of money. I would be more, just whatever. I would be more upset about losing the animal. All right, I don't care about the money. All right, the money is whatever. So if I have 60 animals and they've gone up in value, and that is entirely my money, I would go to the bank and take a loan for 60 more animals. All right, because why not? Right? I mean, I'm leveraging against my own money, and when I do that, I get a tax benefit. All right, I get a tax benefit, and I can appreciate more assets at the same time. Right? Makes a lot of sense, right? That's how I run my business, and it is what it is. At the end of the day, I talk about this all the time. In terms of a realistic sense, I actually make more money farming in my backyard than anybody on the planet makes doing just about anything, and it is by a massive margin. I legitimately have some of the best financials on the planet. Legitimately, I have some of the best financials on the planet. I started this business by myself. I grew my business by over 1,000% in the last 2.5 years. And I actually anticipate that I will more than double the size of my business by the end of the year. As of today, I bring home about $500,000 a year. That's my take-home pay. All right, I legitimately have some of the best financials on the entire planet. And I managed to do this all by myself in a backyard running commercial cattle. I legitimately out-earned practically the entire planet, starting myself a cattle farm. All right, I'm not making it up. I'm a very, and I've always said that I am very, I am actually living proof that it's possible. I am living proof that it is possible. If you go out and you actually get after it, you can actually make it too. I actually made it. I am living proof that it is possible. I am a first generation cattleman. I started this cattle business by myself. I legitimately taught myself how to run cattle. I run this business effectively by myself all the time. And I actually made it. I legitimately first generation cattleman. Legitimately make more money than anybody on the entire planet by a massive margin. Just about everybody on the entire planet. All right, it is what it is. All right, and I actually did it in real life, and I'm living proof that it is possible. All right, and at the end of the day, I show you how I do it. I mean, and I do that with the, just because when I was learning how, I'm telling you, the thing about my situation is that it legitimately took me 15 years to make it. It took me 15 years to make it. I worked like 15 hours a day my entire life. I didn't even get paid until my 12th year. All right, and when I take a look at my situation, I'm like, if somebody did this for me, like if somebody legitimately showed me how to become a farmer and showed me how to run a farm, that would have been, that would have been incredible for me. Nobody showed me how to start a farm. Nobody showed me how to run cattle. Nobody showed me how to start a business, right? I mean, I legitimately started this business by myself. I run my balance sheet by myself. I run my cattle by myself. I grow my grass by myself. Nobody showed me how to do these things. I legitimately had to learn a majority of this stuff on my own. And and the thing, is I figured, the whole thing about this is that, why not? I figured, it's a very, because at the end of the day, I actually do this stuff, right? Like, I actually did it. I actually do this stuff in real life. I'm not making it up. All right, and it's like, I actually managed to do it. I'm living proof that it is possible. All right, if you legitimately decided to get after it today, and you got yourself a small lease property, or you even just bought yourself a 20-acre field for about $1,000 a month. If you go and you buy yourself a 20-acre field, it'll cost you about 200 grand. It'll cost you about 200 grand in my area, and that's about $1,000 a month. All right, that's about $1,000 a month, maybe 1,500, something like that. And on that, and just understand that on a 10-acre field, on a 10.5-acre field, I run about 150 to 200 cattle a year. All right, if you ran 40 cattle a year on a 20-acre field, you could still make enough money to practice for free. I run about 150 to 200 cattle a year on this 10.5-acre field by myself, and my results are incredibly good. All right, when you take a look at what I do, my results are borderline better than the commercial average. All right, legitimately, I do that well in this backyard by myself. I run about 150 to 200 cattle a year. All right, if you bought a 20-acre field and you ran even 40 cattle a year on it, you would make enough money to just practice for free. That's legitimately all it would take. If you got to the 10% mark, you could practice for free. And if you could practice for free, that's incredibly good, right? Because then you don't have to worry about the money anymore. The $1,000 a month that you need to pay for your land, you make it when you farm. The $500 a month that you need for your fertilizer 8 months out of the year, you make that money when you farm. Right? You might even make yourself a small profit. All right, you don't have to, and I've always said you don't have to be poor if you don't want to, right? I guarantee it. If you have become poor, you will die poor. I guarantee it. There is legitimately zero chance that you will turn yourself around, almost zero. And I don't say that to be malicious. The whole thing about becoming poor is that once you have become poor, you are probably stuck being poor forever. You will never turn yourself around. Under any circumstance, I can almost guarantee it. And I don't say that to be malicious. Well, let me go in. I've always said, like looking for validation. You should not be looking for validation. Nobody cares about your opinion. What does it matter if you find 10 other idiots that have the same opinion as you? Go and actually look to progress yourself, right? Look for progression. If I do this, it will systematically improve my situation. All right, if I do this, it will increase the amount of money that I make by $500 a month. Right, granted, don't go and sell your soul to the devil for some worthless thing. I mean, but look to progress your life. Look to go and do better for yourself. And understand that when you go out into the world and you look to do better for yourself, it is going to be difficult. All right, but it should not be like you should not be putting yourself in a situation where you are throwing a Hail Mary into the middle of nowhere and then bankrupting forever. It will be difficult. More or less, it will be difficult passing the mental barrier than anything else. Because if you legitimately went out right now and you bought yourself a 20-acre field and you just whatever, and you just did the 10% stuff, right? You wouldn't have to worry about the money anymore. All right, you could grow a little bit of grass. If you start growing some grass and you have some biomass, right? Even if you mess it up, you can refertilize your field effectively, multiple times a year, whatever, and then you can, when you have some biomass, you can put some cattle on it and the cattle will harvest the grass for you, right? Buy the right type of cattle, a commodity animal, purchase them at the commodity prices, utilize medications, etc., etc. Make sure that their poop looks okay. Right, make sure that the animals are digesting their feed properly. Granted that you just follow the guidelines or just whatever, not even the guide. I don't care what you do. You don't have to. I don't care if you died. All right, I'm just telling you that's how I would do it. That is how I would do it. Buy yourself a 20-acre. If I had nothing, if I legitimately had nothing, I would still look to buy myself a 20-acre field. A 20-acre field would cost about $1,000 a month if it was just a raw piece of land. All right, there are legitimately 50-acre fields that you can buy for $3,000 a month, $2,700 a month. It's just a raw piece of land with a pond and a fence around it. All right, and I would buy myself a 20-acre field. It'd be about $1,000 a month, and then I would I would grow the grass, and then I would just put the cattle on it. All right, and I'm just saying that when it comes to running cattle, I run about 150 to 200 cattle a year on this 10.5-acre field. All right, I run about 150 to 200. If I had a 20-acre field, it would be closer to 350. And when it comes to buying cattle, how do I make the money to buy the cattle? By selling the animals that I have, right? I raise the animals that I have and I sell them, and then I take the money and I reinvest it. Right? When I take my 25 animals and I sell them, I will make enough money to buy 50. When I sell my 45 animals, I will make enough money to buy 90. And if I go from 45 to 90, then I'm net, and that would, and then whatever, I pay the bank back, let's say 40 animals, so I have 50 animals. That would put me in a situation where I would, leverage against all 50. All right, etc., etc. All right, it is what it is. I mean, here in about 2 months, I'll be selling about 25 animals. I'll probably make enough money to buy 50. And in all honesty, the amount of money that I'm making is skyrocketing. All right, I don't know how else to put it other than to just tell you it is what it is. And, it is what it is, all right? I'm not saying that, to be whatever. I'm not saying that to be a prick about it. I'm telling you that that's the truth. And I figured that, if I tell you the truth, then it just is what it is, right? And then, maybe it will help push you in the right direction, help push other people in the right direction. How did I make such a drastic amount of money? I legitimately made more money in my backyard farming commercial cattle than anybody on the planet made doing just about anything, and it was by a massive margin. I pay myself about $20,000 a month, $25,000 a month, and I only liquidate 20% of my assets on a monthly basis. The other 80% of my assets are continuing to go up in value and have already gone up in value substantially. All right, that's how I run my balance sheet. All right, because I'm not giving you my opinion, right? I'm not giving you my opinion. Nobody cares about an opinion. If you have a bunch of opinions and you have nothing to show for it, congratulations. That's a clear indicator that you are poor. Not broke, but legitimately poor. All right, and if you're legitimately poor, you're probably going to die poor. Nobody cares. All right, you don't want to be in a situation where you're poor. Your assets will pay for themselves, and in all reality, your assets will make you enough money to purchase more assets if you do it correctly. You should not be worried about the money. The amount of money that you need to actually make money is so minuscule that it does not matter. And just to put things in perspective, if I make $500,000 a year and it costs me 50 grand, I just take the 50 grand out of the $500,000 that I make. All right, if I make $20,000 a month and I need to go and buy $350 worth of fertilizer, I just take the $350 out of the $20,000. All right, that's how I do it. Your assets don't cost you anything. Granted that you are purchasing them at their appraisal value and you have a knowledgeable idea of how to appreciate the value of that asset. And in reality, your assets should be buying you more assets. You should not be scraping money off of your business, all right? Like if I talk to a business owner and their whole thing was, whatever, nobody cares about your dreams. I've said this, you might think that it's a good idea to whatever, your dream and but nobody cares. At the end of the day, you should be using your money to purchase more assets that produce positive returns, all right? That's what I think. That's how I did it. My assets buy me more assets. All right, when I sell my cattle, I will sell 25 and I will buy 50. Right, my assets buy me more assets and I leverage against them for tax benefits. Right, and in reality, I can already buy anything on the entire planet. Effectively anything. I can already buy it. It doesn't matter. Granted that it's not like me being an idiot. Like if I went to the Lamborghini store and bought 3 Lamborghinis, then yeah, whatever, right? I mean, stuff like that. Granted that I don't be an idiot, I can effectively buy anything on the entire planet. I make about 10 times more money than I spend. All of the money, a majority of the money that I make and then some goes into my business, into growing my business. I make more money in my backyard farming cattle by myself than anybody on the planet makes doing just about anything, and it is by a massive margin. Just about the entire planet. All right, and it just is what it is. I mean, you don't like it, you can sue me or have fun dying poor. I am legitimately showing you what it looks like to be like a top 0.0000001%. Start myself my own business, knowledgeably appreciate assets, grow my business by over 1,000% in 2 years. I'm showing you what it looks like. All right, because this is something that I feel like is not discussed in very, very, very thorough, it's not very thoroughly discussed. And I feel like this is something that in terms of a reality sense, this is very good information. Knowing stuff like this is very important. Right? Because why do I feel like discussing stuff like this is incredibly important, because when you look at my financial situation and you take a look at it for what it is, it effectively puts me in like the 0.0000001 to 0.000000001 percentile. All right, that's effectively where my financials put me. And I feel like that, stuff like this is not discussed enough. Why do we not discuss the idea of making drastic amounts of money? Why is that idea not discussed very often, right? Why is that not discussed very often? I feel like it's something that should be talked about, and the idea should be clearly presented. Because it's very good, right? I've always said that there are benefits. There are legitimate benefits to being able to generate massive sums of money. There are benefits to it. I am telling you right now, like if I was given the choice, because I've spoken about this, I've even worked for minimum wage. And as of today, I effectively make more money than the entire planet. Just about. And it's by a lot. And, I would rather, that there are benefits, legitimate benefits to being able to generate such a massive amount of money. There are benefits to it. All right, like, and you know, like me, even if I lost everything today, I could redo it all in 30 seconds. It doesn't matter. All right, I legitimately don't have to worry about money at all. All right, at all. I legitimately don't have to worry about money at all. There are benefits to just being able to generate massive sums of money. Right? I mean, you know, and effectively, you know, there are lots of benefits to it, okay? And I would encourage people to, you know, keep yourself right with God, right? I always say, you know, don't sell your soul to the devil. But think about, why not, right? Why not go and make a massive amount of money, right? Why not? Why not go and make a massive amount of money? Why not? I'm not saying sell your soul to the devil, right? But, but for the right person, and I'm just looking to be a source of inspiration for the right person. Just understand that I made it. All right, understand that I made it. And I do very well for myself. And when you take a look at my situation, it effectively puts me in like the very, 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 very top percentiles of the entire US economy, okay? That's where it puts me. And and I'm not being a malicious person about it. I'm not getting a kick out of saying that or anything like that. I'm just telling you it is what it is, all right? There are benefits to being able to generate massive sums of money. There are benefits to it. I mean, even if I lost everything, I could redo it all in 30 seconds. It doesn't matter. All right, I don't worry about money at all. Legitimately have zero concerns about money. All right, there are benefits to just being able to generate massive sums of money, all right? And that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.